All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're a few minutes in, and other people can jump in as the presentation goes on. My name is Mark Evans. I'm the Associate Superintendent of Business for the Oak Grove School District, and just wanted to give an update on the budget situation, where we are after the budget was adopted. We adopt our budget in June, but that is typically before the state has finished their budget. So after the dust all settles, we will update our budget at the first interim in December. And we have some adjustments we'll have to do to change what was done in June to reflect the most recent changes to the state budget and our expenditures going forward. And we'll respond to some concerns that the county brought up that I'll be talking about later. So let's kind of start off by talking about what we're going to cover tonight. We'll be looking at the budget update adoption, what has come in after we did our budget, what did the state settle on when they finished their budget, and how does that impact us? We'll look at the multi-year deficits that we're facing going forward, our funding plan for those deficits, and then we'll talk about the County Office of Education. The Santa Clara County Office of Education has concerns with our multi-year outlook, and they sent us a letter addressing that. And we're dealing with that by having a budget advisory committee and creating a plan to take to the board in November that they have to adopt per the Santa Clara County Office of Education in December when we do our first interim report. So let's look at where we were in June. All right, here we are in June. What we adopted, the revenues, the money coming in, the expenditures, what we expect to go out, and then the difference. This is our multi-year presentation because we are required by law to look at the current budget year and then 2 more years afterwards. So you'll see in the very first column we have our estimated actuals, and in June this is where we thought the year would end in 24-25. The budget is what we presented. We expected in revenue in June to receive $141 million through various sources, but our expenditures were looking to be $152 million. So that gives a deficit of a little over $11 million. We have some reserves that we were going to transfer some funds in to offset that. And we're going to use some of our restricted funds to help offset that, so that at the end of the year, you'll see we have a nice chunk of change, $23 million, but not all of that is usable, and I'll go into explanation of that a little bit later. So that's what 25-26 looked like in June, and then we're required to look at 26-27 and 27-28, and that's what the other columns are. You'll see in the revenues that they stay relatively flat. We get COLAs, but we're also losing students, so our revenues are not growing very quickly, if barely at all. Our expenditures are relatively flat too. They go up a little bit, but relatively flat. Part of that's because we are shrinking in size as we lose population. But the deficit, because those two things are staying constant, the revenues and expenditures, the deficit is staying constant as well. And this is our real challenge, that we need to figure out how do we right this balance between what's coming in and what's going out. That's where we were in June. But fortunately, there were some good things that happened over the summer. After the budget was adopted, the state approved a plan to give out $1.7 billion in state money to schools. It's one-time money, and it's distributed based on your populations, your ADA, your attendance. That grant was not certain when we did our budget, so we did not include it in our budget. But now that it is certain, we're figuring in that we will receive about $2.5 million. These are one-time funds. We'll get them in 25-26. They will help our budget. They'll reduce that deficit, but they won't solve the multi-year deficit because they're not going to come every year. They come in 25-26. And we have no anticipation or expectation to put in the budget for future years. If those come in the future, we don't know about them yet, so we can't budget them. The other nice change actually is ongoing money. We have TK, and one of the requirements of TK that the legislature wanted to pass was to have a ratio of 10 students for every adult. So that means we're trying to schedule classes to be a size of 20. And then there'll be the teacher and an aide. If we go beyond 20 past a certain point, we'd actually add an additional aid. That costs money. The state recognized that, so they actually increased their contribution to what's called the TK add-on. We figured it would go up some, so we budgeted a little bit of it, but we didn't budget all of it because we just didn't know that the legislature would approve the full $5,545. We budgeted about $4,300. Now they did the whole amount, the whole $55.45, and that actually will give us over $400,000 more this year. And what's really nice is it'll go on in 26, 27, and 27, 28. But it is designated. It's not money we can use any way we want. It's for the TK staff. So we need to make sure that we're covering those expenses with those dollars. So with that money come obligations. Okay. So let's look at where we are now. Where do our general fund revenues come from? And then I've added the column on the right that shows you where we are with the updated budget. There is one major source of our revenues comes from what's called LCFF, another wonderful education set of letters. It's the local control funding formula. And this is a combination of local property taxes, additional aid from the state, and money towards transportation, and the TK add-on would be in this pot too. So you'll see where we were at budget in June was just shy of $110 million. Because of that extra money from TK predominantly, you'll see we're up to 110, almost $300,000. So that's why that number changed. That's an update based on the TK add-on, and that'll go towards those aids. Federal money has actually declined over the years, but a lot of the one-time funds, COVID funds, additional things are fading. And right now we're expecting a total next year of about $4.1 million from the federal government. We're anticipating that staying flat, and we think we'll be in a good spot if it does stay flat. Other state, this is other money we get from the state besides the LCFF. This could be the lottery money we get. It could be money we get for our after-school programs that fund the ELOP, Extended Learning Opportunity Plans. A variety of pools of money, many of them restricted or with specific purposes. But you'll see from June, we went from 17.5 million to almost 20 million. That's the one-time money we received. That's the $2.5 million. Okay. We have other local monies. Could be we get money from the state for redevelopment agency for facilities. We get money for, this is where the money for donations for science camp would be. There are lots of different pots of money that go in here. We get reimbursements from Medi-Cal for medical services we provide. So that's where this comes in. That number can fluctuate over the course of the year depending on the donations that come in and all. So you'll see we went from a total of 141.5 million to 144.4 million, about a $3 million growth, and that makes sense. 2.5 million in one time, and 400,000 in kinder TK money, not kinder. All right. So then let's look what that general fund money pays for. All right. And here I had the budget from 24-25, the estimated actuals, the budget from 25-26. The updated budget has not changed. We will change the updated budget when we do our report in December. So at this point, no salary increases are in there. Even ones that are settled, they'll go in when we do our first interim report. Any additional changes in staffing that's happened over the summer, people who we've hired or didn't come back, those things will all be sorted out in our first interim report. The first interim report in December is actually the most accurate budget report because it's after the state has settled and after all of our staffing is done. So you see certificated. This is predominantly teachers, but anybody certificated, administrators are certificated as well. They hold certificates. Classified, all of our support staff. They could be custodians, they could be health clerks, they could be secretaries, clerks in the business department, and those are bus drivers would be in there. About 21 million. And on the side, I've shown the percentage. I'll show you a graph in a minute. It might be better if you're more of a visual person. Benefits. So the benefits would be, we think of health and welfare, but benefits would also be retirement plans, the cost for workers' comp, the cost for unemployment insurance and things like that. So that would be about $40 million. Supplies, and I've highlighted supplies because there's a huge change from 2024-25 to 25-26. The primary change there was we did a math adoption. It was a big ticket item, and that cost between $2.5 and $3 million. We're not doing that. That was a one-time expense. So that's the significant reason for that drop in supplies. Another significant drop is in services. We provide services, they're called contracted services. Many of these support students, and I have a slide on this later, but they're also contracted services for buses that we can't provide a bus route for a student and we have to bring them somewhere special, so we contract with a private vendor. You also have utilities in here. This is where our electric bill would be and our gas bill. So there's lots of things under contracted services. Some of them are companies we hire. Some of them would be plumbers or roofers that we hire that we can't do the job ourselves, so we have to go to outside vendors for facilities. And they're also staff we need for speech and language. If a special ed student needs a certain service that we can't provide and we have to send them to the county or another private program, that comes out of this. So we don't anticipate that to be as great next year. It's one that varies a lot because those needs change over the course of the year. So we're hoping to have a reduction of about 5 million. And the other places, some small sections, capital outlay would be a new vehicle or something like that. Other outgo or costs we pay when we have to support the county for special ed programs. So a total expenditures of $152 million. And the challenge is that we were talking 144.4 on the revenue side. Oh, let's go. Here's the graph. So if you're more of a visual person, the kind of lighter blue is certificated salaries, about 38%. The orange is the classified salaries, about 14%. Benefits for everybody, a little over a quarter. And then the other big item would be services and operating expenses at 15%. And then small amount for books and supplies. And the other outgo is sizable at 5%. And again, that's part of our special ed services predominantly. So the pie gets divvied up, but most of it actually is for people because that's what we do. We're a people business. We work with students, we have staff, and that's the largest share of what our expenditures are for. They're for people. 78% of the money we spend is for salaries and benefits. So here's looking at that chart with just the people involved. The certificated, the classified, and their benefits comes to a total of $119 million. So a little bit under 120 million. So of our expenditures at 152 million, that's 78%. So the pie chart, if you would look at it, people versus mostly stuff, about 78% goes to the people, our people. Some of that stuff might be contracted services and other people. Okay. So just another representation of where the money goes and how our district operates. And here's the slide on the kind of services, what we call the 5,000s, because we categorize the different type of expenditures we have. And the services are predominantly vendors, but like I said, you might also find the electric bill and the gas bill here. Many of these relate to student services. They're services not just for fixing the roof, but for providing support for students. And like I mentioned earlier, those might be a special ed program that we don't have here and we have to send them somewhere else. It might be the transportation to get them to that other program. It might be a speech and language therapist that we can't find, so we contract out. Might be another position, aides we've had to contract out because sometimes it's just hard to find people. So those are the dollars that would be student related, and a good deal of these contracted services are there. The nice thing is that the contracted services this year have dropped to 15%. They were almost 20% last year. So that's a $5 million change, and hopefully we can hold on to that. We don't have too many other services that we have to provide that we can't do here. So then I wanted to look at the multi-year deficits, because this is the real challenge that we're facing. We oftentimes anticipate these, and we always have to plan based on the information we have. Sometimes when you have like that $2.5 million come in, it changes your metric. So this is where we are right now, and this is what the county is evaluating us on. So here's the slide shown a little bit differently. Again, our budget for 25-26 is in the first row, under the descriptions, 26-27 and 27-28. And then you'll see the revenues, which are the same as the last slide, and the expenditures. And there's that constant gap of about $11 million, but you'll see I've updated the gap for this year because the $2.5 million came in from the state. So that's why the $11 million in 25-26 dropped down to the 8 and change. But because we don't have enough money in the general fund, we're going to transfer some in from our Fund 40. And this is what we would need to transfer in from outside the general fund from what's called Fund 40. That's a capital outlay fund. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that. But because we're deficit spending, we need to write the books. And we're using these reserves from Fund 40 to make us solvent for the 3-year outlook. Again, trying to present it graphically, appealing to different types of learning modalities. The blue would be the revenue we have coming in, and the orange is the expenditures going out. So that kind of constant gap is the challenge we're facing. You'll see now that the red line in 25-26 doesn't go down as far. So the green line is our contribution, doesn't go up as much. But it's kind of back to that gap in 26-27 and 27-28. People will ask, well, if your deficit's $8 million, how come your contribution's not $8 million? Few reasons there. When we use our restricted funds, we can tap into those to pay for programs. And that we're using those reserves, but they are restricted reserves, and I'll talk about those in a little bit more, for a specific function or purpose. We can't use them as we choose. They're designated by the state or the federal government as to how those funds must be used. So we're trying to optimize those in the years ahead. That's why we don't have to contribute the full $11 million each time. So this is the deficit funding plan. We're using those reserves. Reserves are just like your savings account at home. You get to use them once. They don't come in on a monthly or annual basis. And once they're spent, they're not there to sustain that spending. They just cover the gap. Like when you need to get a new set of tires and you have to tap into the savings account, it draws it down, but you get your set of tires and hopefully you don't need them for several years more. So let's look at those reserves, because I talked about restricted, I talked about unrestricted. Let's look at them in just Fund 1. I'm going to work with 2 funds tonight. Fund 1, which is our general fund, our primary fund where all of our operations take place. And I'll talk about Fund 40 a little later, which is our capital reserve fund. There are 2 types of funds we have in that ending fund balance. There are restricted funds and there are unrestricted funds. We have a $35 million ending fund balance. You know, and I've heard it said we have $67 million in reserves, and that is a totally true statement. But what are those reserves made up of is the next question we have to ask. 24 million of the 35 are restricted. 6 million of that would be for the ELOP program. Some of it is for Prop 28, our VAPA program, over $1 million there. We have about $10 million in local, but those are specific funds for facilities. And some of those might be restricted funds because they've been put aside for science camps and things that have designated purposes. So of the 35 million, 24 million are restricted, and we have to use according to state and federal rules. And we will try to optimize those, but we can't just tap into them any way we like. The unrestricted is just shy of $10 million. And that's money we have more flexibility with. It is a one-time source, but it is more flexibility. And I'll break down the unrestricted for you, because this is an important conversation. There's $10 million, but we're required to always keep 3% in reserve. So I can take that $10 million, but I can't take all of it. All right. So based on our spending, we expect the required reserve to be $4.5 million. So what leaves unassigned one-time money is about 5.3 million. That can help offset the deficit. It can pay for other things, but again, it can pay for it just once. So in our Fund 1, that $35 million, we take 24 million off the table because it has to be used specific ways, but we can see if we can optimize it. Like I said, some of it's that Prop 28 money in the restricted pot. Well, that goes to teachers because that's what it pays for, is the VAPA program. We hired 5 new teachers with that money. And as we need it, we can use that for that purpose. But the money we have to work with, $10 million, we really have a little more than half because the reserve requirement, that pot has to always stay there. And if we can't meet that pot, we have to transfer in enough money to meet that reserve. Now let me talk about Fund 40. Fund 40 is called the Capital Outlay Reserves. I'm going to use the same terms, restricted and unrestricted. It's not exactly the same, but I think just for ease of reference, so I don't throw too many jargon pieces at you. There are funds there that are more fluid, so I'll call them unrestricted. And there are funds that have a specific plan and purpose as designated by the State Allocation Board. So there's a total of $32 million in this account, all right? 11.8 million of it is restricted. Those are the funds still remaining from the minor sale, and that has a very specific plan approved by the State Allocation Board on how that could be used for one-time purchases, one-time expenses. So that leaves about 20 million in what I will call unrestricted, all right? That means money that we have more fluidity with. It officially has some assignments and obligations, but we have more flexibility, so I'm calling it unrestricted. $16 million is what we need of that to pay those deficits. So you immediately go from $20 million, if we have to follow through with that, to $3.6 million. So Fund 40 is there. It's a placeholder for us. We have never had to tap into it very much. We have tapped into it a little bit, but it's always allowed us to be positive, having a good credit rating and a good 3-year outlook. But the fact that we are deficit spending and relying on this, the county now is starting to say, wait a second, if you go through that money and you don't change your spending habits, what happens? What's the next plan? And that's where they came in. They looked at our budget in June and they gave us a conditional approval. Let's go back to what the kind of core of the problem is in their eyes. The core of the problem in their eyes is the middle line in red, the fact that we're deficit spending, because you just can't sustain that indefinitely. We can sustain it for several years because we have these reserves. And if things change and we get more revenues, then maybe we won't have to tap into them as much. But based on the data we have now, we have to plan according to that data set out by the state and the county. And this is what we go with. And we have all these deficits. That's where we were in June. Like I said, it's a little bit better now, right? Because we have a little better funds in 25, 26. But the county said, we have a problem with this. They sent us a whole letter and there was a specific paragraph, and that basically they said, without the projected transfers from Fund 40, the district would have a negative fund balance in the general fund in all 3 years of the projection. Not just the third year, not just the second year, but all 3 years. And then they kind of said, continued dependence on this transfer in from other funds to balance our accounts, it's not sustainable. You'll eventually run out of those reserves because they're one time. They'll lead to fiscal insolvency. So they're asking us to get our expenditures in line with our general fund revenues. I think the county has seen that this is happening in other parts of the county, and they're seeing school districts in various stages of these concerns, and not just in Santa Clara County, but other counties are seeing it as well. So they're getting more direct with the letters. And I've gotten letters from County Office of Education for 15 years, and this is the most direct I've ever seen. And this was their conditional approval. They basically said, as a condition for approval of the first interim budget report, supporting documentation of a board-approved fiscal stabilization plan is required as part of the first interim submission. So that's what we're working on. They're going to say, what's your plan to bring down your revenues? We've been through this before as a district. It was before I was here, but I've also been through it with other districts. You need to have a plan to reduce your expenditures. And this happened, I think, 7 or 8 years ago. There was a budget advisory committee. So we created one of those. We have some parents and members of the bargaining unit and other staff on there to kind of go through what is our plan. I won't go into the detail. That plan will be presented to the board in November. We're meeting and working and talking through it, but let's see if I can get this to, there we go. But this is the task at hand. Deficit spending, balance expenditures and revenues by June 2028. And we got to submit the plan to address the deficit at the first interim. So the needed reductions that we're working on right now on our expenditure side, not in 25-26, but for 26-27, starting next June, July 1st, a reduction about $3 million in expenditures. And then the following year, and on top of that $3 million, an additional $2 million. And that will help us right it. It won't completely correct it, but we'll try to tap into those restricted resources as much as possible. Okay. So we've done some reductions already. We had some resignations last year, some retirements, and we didn't replace those. A confidential salary, an ed services coordinator, a public information officer. We did the retirement incentive. All those things came up to about $1 million. Those are already in our budget. So that kept it from being worse. But we also have had some reductions since the budget was adopted. We had our chief operations officer change positions. He moved from the district. So we're looking at how did we restructure? We're trying not to fill that position, and the positions we use, we're trying to tap into more bond money to not hit the general fund. We had an ELTP change districts. So again, leaving things vacant so that we have the space that's vacant, just not filled, and take those savings with no harm to anyone. And then an ed services secretary is left, so we're working on how does that position get rethought and what savings can we generate there. Okay, so we'll come in November. The Budget Advisory Committee will finish up and come with a presentation. What we have to present to the county are hard reductions, okay? But we will also make recommendations to the board. You know, we've talked, they asked about, well, can we improve our revenues? Well, possibly. I think, you know, increase property leases. We don't have a whole lot of property to lease, but we might be able to generate a little additional revenue there. People are asking about a parcel tax. That's a possibility. I know we looked at that before, but we'll have to see if that is an option, and that's an elected thing that we wouldn't know until it happens. So I can't put that as part of the plan. Improved attendance. We've talked about this. As we improve our attendance, and it's going up, but we need to kind of really make a push. Every time we have a higher level of attendance, we get a higher level of funding. So those are some recommendations and other focuses to work on the revenue side. But on the reduction side, we will have to look at efficiencies, programs, services, positions, and products. Those are the things that are kind of on. And as you saw from our chart, 78% of our budget is people. So it's going to be hard to have $3 million of reductions without impacting individuals. So, but we want to kind of, you know, be as considerate as possible, put together a plan. And as I understand it, the last time we put together a plan, it didn't have to be fully implemented. So we'll see where things go in the future. But this is our task at hand right now, to address that deficit, to use those reserves to keep us afloat as long as possible, and to find ways that we can increase our ongoing revenues. So I'll just open it up for questions. If you want to put something in the chat for a question, go ahead. I'll check and see if we had anything on the budget page, the form that was filled out. Let's see. There was one question about property tax and revenues. I won't go into too much depth here, but the schools are not funded purely with property tax. Our district gets the property tax, and part of that goes to the school that you pay, but it's not enough to fill the bucket. The bucket that the state gives us, we call that LCFF, gets filled first with property taxes, and then it gets filled with the state aid. We don't have enough property taxes to fill the bucket by itself. There are other districts around us that do. They're called community funded or basic aid districts. So the state doesn't even have to add money to their bucket. But our property taxes go up so far, and then the state fills up the rest. As houses change hands, they generate more property tax, but we have a lot of homes that have been lived in for 20 to 40 years. So their property tax base is from 1995 or something. Okay. Another question, actually this one is more of a facilities question from the bond and some of our classrooms that are not individualized. We're actually working on how to create those open classrooms into more enclosed classrooms, but my email is there. Drop me an email if you want me to talk to you about that. That's a little different topic. A question about supporting the teachers and approve the contract demands. This is a real challenge because as we're facing the deficit, we do need to stay competitive. But how do we do that where it's sustainable and we can create an environment that we can make our salaries more competitive, but still make sure that our district is fiscally solvent and somebody else isn't looking over our shoulder. So that is a concern, mutual concern. And a question about Glider, the property of Glider. Drop me an email at mevans@ogsd.net, and I'll be glad to address that. I'm going to stick to kind of budget topics here. Let me jump back to the Google Meet, if I can find it. Alden, did you see any questions? No? All right. Well, if there are no questions, I'll let you have the rest of the evening to yourself. If you do come up with a question, and if you're like me, it'll come up an hour from now, please drop me an email and I'll be glad to interact with you. One question? Okay. Oftentimes when you look at our adopted, let me repeat the question. Hasn't the budget been over projected in recent years? We oftentimes receive more revenue than we expect. When you look at our adopted budget versus our first interim, that is a true statement because we don't put things in the adopted budget if we don't have pretty much certainty that they'll pass. The last 5 years particularly have been very volatile that way because there's been lots of one-time state monies, federal dollars, ESSER funds, other COVID funds. There's been learning recovery block grants that come in and then completely change our revenues. So if you look at our first interim report, those revenues tend to be a lot more accurate than the adopted budget. And usually our expenditures, when in the years I've been here, our actuals end up being within 1 to 2% of where we expect them to be at estimated actuals. So yes, there is volatility, particularly between June and our December report. Any other questions? Okay. Then I'll wish you all a good evening. Have a great rest of the night, and we'll cross paths. Again, happy to answer questions if you drop me an email. Happy to discuss it more. This is what I do, and I enjoy it, but I know it's a little wonky for a lot of people. So take care and have a good night.